Okay, today I would like to share with you an overview of one of my favorite Shakespearean plays. It's the story of Romeo and Juliet. Everyone has heard the names Romeo and Juliet. In fact, the name Romeo has become synonymous with romance. And we'll see that the young character Romeo truly was a romantic guy. This was one of Shakespeare's best plays and best beloved plays, even during his lifetime. It was obvious that this was a very popular play with the public, and it has been performed many times, and the story has been told in movies and plays and in books, and it's been reset where it takes place in modern situations and all of that many, many times. So it's probably one of the best known concepts for a story, but I don't want to walk you through some of the details of the plot because it's a very fun story. There are parts of Romeo and Juliet that are very funny. There's a lot of comedy in Romeo and Juliet. A lot of times where the audience would be really laughing, but of course, it's a romantic tragedy in that old Shakespeare just didn't like to tell that many happy stories, right? So let's think about the story of Romeo and Juliet. It's about two teenagers. They're very young, probably 15, 16 years old, although Juliet might have been a little younger than Romeo, maybe as young as 13 or 14. So we're not talking about grown-up adults. They are referred to as star-crossed lovers. This is a phrase that's actually used in the play and has kind of become used since then to talk about people who maybe under different circumstances things would have worked out for them, but because of things that were outside of their control, it was just never meant to be. It's set in the 1500s in Verona, Italy. And Verona is, of course, a very beautiful city, and in those days, the Italian cities. Italy was not a country; it was a whole series of tiny kingdoms, and each kingdom was focused on a major city, and that major city was ruled by a prince. And so, even though there's not a king in this story, there is a prince, and he has kind of the same role that a king would have in our minds when we're talking about old politics. Remember that Shakespeare would have been writing this story in the late 1500s, so this was, even though he was English and he was writing about something that took place in Italy, and English people always thought of Italians as being very different, very romantic, very dramatic. Everything was high drama. That was kind of entertaining to the English. So that was part of the appeal to the audience of the day. So the background of the story is that you have two very wealthy, very powerful families, the Montagues and the Capulets, and they are feuding. They have been involved for generations in a very violent feud. They hate each other. They're supposed to fight each other on sight, and the Prince of Verona is done with it. It is beyond ridiculous. It's no good for the city, and he's ready to put his foot down. So the play opens not with members of the family, but with their servants, Montague servants, Capulet servants, coming to the marketplace. And in those days, you could show your disdain for somebody or something by biting your thumb in their direction, right? That was your way of saying, like, I don't like you, or you make me angry, you're trash, or whatever. And so you've got servants of the Montagues and servants of the Capulets, and they're walking to the marketplace, and one of the servants happens to be biting his thumb. And the other servants from the other family are like, you're biting your thumb at me. And the first servant's like, I'm just biting my thumb at the world in general because I don't like the whole wide world. Well, this is how we meet the Capulets and Montagues. It's obvious that they really don't like each other, to the point that their servants are now biting their thumbs in one another's direction. And of course, it breaks out into a massive fight. The servants are just, I mean, they're throwing fists left and right. And the police have to come and break it up. And the prince is told the Capulets and Montagues are fighting in the marketplace. And when he comes down there, and it's not even the family, it's the servants, he loses his mind. I mean, he loses his mind. And he makes a very rash declaration right then and there. He said, the very next Montague or Capulet to be violent toward the other is going to be killed instantly. There's no prison. There's no other punishment. Any more fighting? I've had it. You fight, you die. Done with it. And so that's kind of the order that is going to be hanging over this whole story. Well, we skip over to the Capulet home now, and we get an opportunity to view the father, Mr. Capulet, if I call him that. And it's obvious that he really loves his daughter, his young daughter Juliet, who he just thinks she's wonderful, and she's got a mom, and she's got a little, she has a maid who's been there her whole entire life. She's very, very sheltered, very pampered and taken care of, and she's evidently very beautiful. And there's this old man, old by her standards. He's probably not like an old man, but like he's like a grown man, and she's like a kid, and his name is Count Paris, and he has seen her, and he thinks she is something. So he's like, I think I want to marry that girl, and has come and talked to her dad about it. Well, this is a powerful count, and he's very he has a lot of authority, has a lot of influence in the community, and so Mr. Capulet doesn't want Juliet to marry. He's like, she's a kid, and you're a lot older than her. And so he tries to be really political about it. And he's like, why don't you just wait a couple more years, kind of let her grow up a little. Basically what he's hoping is like, she will be spared having to marry you because you'll fall in love with somebody else and, stop paying attention to her. This guy's not going away. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that this guy's not going away. He's got his eyes on Juliet, and he's gonna make it his business to get married to her. So that's kind of Juliet's situation. And we go and we drop in on young Romeo, and Romeo is he is really, really depressed. Like he is completely moping and down. You find Romeo is he's a very, very emotional guy. He's either way up or way down. We never see him like saying, "Oh, well, that's cool." No, he can't handle any kind of anything without really reacting strongly to it. He's an interesting character to think about, and I'll just throw this in. I recently did the review for Hamlet, and we talked about the young lady that Hamlet, kind of his ex-girlfriend, and her inability to kind of deal with reality or whatever. Romeo's a lot like that. Romeo is he's never happy. He's like, there's always something out there that's making him, I'm not happy until I get this or whatever. So the very first time we ever see Romeo, his cousin Benvolio, they all had really cool names like that, by the way. Benvolio is like, Romeo, we got to talk about this. Like, you are really, really down, and I'm worried about you. And Romeo says, I'm so in love with this girl. And Benvolio's like, okay, well, just pursue her, right? You're handsome, you're wealthy, you're popular, If you really like a girl, what are you going to do about it? Well, she doesn't want to get married. She wants to become a nun. Well, okay. If that's her choice, just choose somebody else. No. This is it. She's the only love of my life, and her name is Rosaline. And Benvolio's like, Rosaline? Isn't she somehow related to the Capulets? Like, you're a Montague, Romeo. his last name is Montague. You're a Montague, and Rosaline is a Capulet, right? Romeo's like, yeah, she's the niece of Mr. Capulet. So this makes Rosaline Juliet's first cousin, but Romeo doesn't know Juliet yet. And he's like, I have got to see her. I've got to tell her of my love. I've got to beg her to not become a nun. She's got to marry me. I love her with my whole heart, and nothing else is ever going to make me happy. And so Benvolio says, well, you know, the Capulets are giving like this massive party, a masquerade ball. Everyone's going to be wearing masks. Rosaline is sure to be there. Let's put on masks, and we'll just slip in. We'll crash the party. And so Romeo thinks, well, this is my great chance. I'll slip in with my mask on. I'll find Rosaline and I'll beg her to be my wife. So that's what they do. The two of them, and they take a very, very good friend of Romeo's, a fellow by the name of Mercutio, who's also related to the family. So you've got Mercutio and Benvolio and Romeo, and they put their masks on and they slip into the party, and it's a happening party. Like, there's a lot going on there. And instead of finding Rosaline, like, this girl that I love with my whole heart, and I'll never be happy if I don't have her, instead of finding Rosaline, Romeo runs into and meets Juliet, and Rosaline is completely forgotten. So that's one thing we see about Romeo, is that he's rather fickle, right? He was like 5 minutes ago, he was on fire for Rosaline, and Rosaline is the defining force in his life, and then the next minute he's like, forget it. And so he meets and begins to talk to Juliet, and they kind of spark with each other, and they're kind of, she doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know that he's a Montague. He's not initially completely sure who she is. There's a lot of people at this party. It's not like it's all just Capulets. It's, even though it's at the Capulet, mansion. But then when he begins to figure it out, he's like, oh, this is Mr. Capulet's daughter. This could be trouble. Well, when the Capulet family sees their very sheltered, very protected, very precious Juliet talking to a strange young boy, this doesn't sit well with any Capulets. They're like, who's that guy? And what's he doing talking to Juliet? Somebody better figure this out. And so one of the young men, a cousin of Juliet's by the name of Tybalt, kind of interrupts their conversation and begins to try to figure out who Romeo is. Like, he's like, hey, what are you doing here? Why are you talking to Juliet? And when he recognizes him, you're Romeo Montague? What are you doing at our Capulet party? He pulls out his sword and he's ready to kill him right then and there. Like, we're going to fight right now. And Romeo is ready to fight. Sword out, we're ready to go. Well, of course, the prince had just said, you fight, you die. And the Capulets are throwing this massive party, and it would really put just a damper on the fun if you've got somebody killed in the middle of your party. And so Mr. Capulet's like, Tybalt, thanks, but no, we're not fighting tonight. We're just going to take Romeo and we're going to throw him out. Out he goes, right? Tybalt is mad, though. Like, Tybalt is the kind of guy, like, once he's angry, he's never going to get over it, right? Tybalt wanted to fight to the death because Romeo was at the party. That tells you everything you need to know about Tybalt. This guy was, like, locked in. This guy's got no chill whatsoever. It's like, next time I see you, I don't care what the prince says. I don't care. We're going to fight to the death the next time I see you because it was so insulting that you came and tried to talk to Juliet. Well, of course, the party eventually wraps down, and everyone goes home, and Juliet is very, very, her emotions are like all shaken. So the old man, Count Paris, was there at the party. She kind of had a chance to see him. She had a chance to interact with young, handsome, dashing Romeo, and her heart belongs to Romeo. She's like, there's no future with me with Count Paris? None. None, 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 none. Her mom's coming in as like, oh, so did you see Count Paris? He was like really cute and really liked you. And, you know, you need to be thinking about him because, you know, he wants to marry you. And Juliet's like, I don't want to say anything to my mom because, you know, I'm not going to fight with her over this guy, but yuck, I'm going to marry Romeo. Psh, I'm just going to marry Romeo. That's it. She can't say that, right? So her maid, like, make sure the bed is, everything's okay. You got your milk to drink. Everything's good. You going to bed? Okay. So the door closed, the lights out, and poor Juliet, who is just, I mean, she's got it bad for Romeo. She slips out onto the balcony of her bedroom, which overlooks the garden, and you have one of the most famous scenes in all of Shakespeare's plays. Probably the most famous scene is the balcony scene. What Juliet doesn't know is that Romeo, after being thrown out of the party, has come back. He's like creeping in her backyard so he can look in her window. We don't recommend this behavior, right? He's out there. And so when he sees the light go on in the bedroom and he knows she's in there, like that light, just the light from her bedroom is more than he can handle. I'm telling you, this guy's over the top. And so he has these famous lines, "Behold, what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east. Juliet is the sun." He likens the light of the sun to Juliet herself. And this is a guy who's just looking at light coming out of a window. Okay, he's not looking at her. He just sees the light in her window and is like panting and nearly to die. Then she comes out on the balcony and she says, famously, "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?" She's just like talking to herself. "Romeo, where are you, Romeo?" And Romeo hears her and realizes she's got it bad for me like I've got it bad for her. And so he makes himself known to her and he climbs up the wall and they talk. And she has the famous, you know, "A rose by any other name would smell just as sweet." You know, can you renounce your last name? I'll renounce mine. You kind of this idea of identity. There are young people coming to struggle with, you know, am I my family or am I my own individual self separate from my family? I have my own identity. Well, the two of them arrive at a very big conclusion. Juliet is feeling the pressure of this Count Paris guy. Now, she does not realize that her dad is trying to give her a few extra years. She just knows mom is like going, "This guy, man, this is the one. You need to marry this guy." So she's feeling that pressure. And then here's Romeo that she really loves. And so they make a really rash decision. We're going to get married tomorrow. Like, we're not putting this off. We're going to slip out and go to this particular church where there's this preacher named Friar Lawrence, and we'll ask him to marry us. And so they do, right? They're each supposed to be going their own way and doing their different things. And Juliet slips away from her family, which is very difficult, meets Romeo, and they go to the church and they explain to Friar Lawrence who they are and that they want to get married. Now, Friar Lawrence is he's a preacher who has wanted to put an end to this feud for a long time. Like, it's been his goal to get the Montagues and Capulets to make peace with each other, but he's never seen how. And so he thinks to himself, okay, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. These two want to get married. I'm going to marry them, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show the two families how stupid their argument and their feud really is. And so he performs the wedding ceremony, and the two of them are husband and wife. You may kiss the bride, everything, right? So they go their way, and nobody, they can't tell anybody that they're married. They've got a plan that you know, Friar Lawrence is going to help them bring the families together and kind of, you know, break the ice, let them in on what's happened and all of this stuff. Friar Lawrence is going to kind of steer the conversation. He's going to bring this all about. None of that's going to happen, right? Because when they go their separate ways, Romeo, who's back with his good friends Mercutio and Benvolio, happens to run into Juliet's hot-headed cousin Tybalt. Remember him from the party? Like, Mr. Locked In. I'm gonna next time I see you, you die. And so Tybalt sees Romeo with his buddies and is like, "You, Romeo, I've got a sword. I'm gonna run you through." And so he pulls out his sword. Well, Romeo is now thinking, "This is my wife's cousin. I can't kill him." And so he tries to be conciliatory, like, "Oh, we don't need to fight, and remember what the prince said." And his own friends, like his cousins, are looking at him like, "Why are you acting like a coward? This man is insulting you. He's calling you names. He's insulting your family. You need to pull your sword out and kill him now." That was kind of the manly macho response, and they don't understand why Romeo is not wanting to kill a Capulet. Look, he wants to die. Let's fight him right now. So when Romeo won't fight Mercutio, Romeo loves, they're really good buddies, right? They're very, very close. Mercutio is like, "If you're not going to fight him for his insults, I will." So Mercutio pulls out his sword and begins to fight Tybalt. There's nothing good that can come out of this. There's no good ending. Nothing good can come out of this fight. Tybalt kills Mercutio, Romeo's beloved friend and family member. And Romeo is just beside himself with grief. And he pulls out his sword and they go to fighting and he kills Tybalt. So now you got two dead bodies, one Romeo, one Capulet. And guess what the prince says? The prince has said, "If you fight, you die." And so Romeo's family doesn't know anything about this. They don't know that he's been secretly married to a Capulet. Nobody knows this. Only Romeo and Juliet and Friar Lawrence. They're the only ones in on the secret. And Romeo, being like the prince of the Montague family, the Prince of Verona, decides, "Well, you know what, this would not be good for me to just kill him right here in front of everybody." So instead, he banishes him from Verona, tells him, "You must leave the city of Verona. You can never return. If you ever enter the city gates again, you shall die immediately." So this is the prince showing some mercy to Romeo, even though Romeo had violated the prince's very direct order. So Romeo has to leave town, gone and never going to be able to come back. And of course, Juliet, because Romeo is gone, Juliet is just distraught. She's like lying on her bed, sobbing her eyes out. And her parents just don't have good parental insight here, right? They're looking there, "Oh, poor girl. She's really sad because Tybalt died. Her cousin Tybalt is dead. Well, we know what will cheer her up. Let's go ahead and let her marry Count Paris now. That'll take her mind off her cousin being dead." They have no idea. They have no clue that she's in love with Romeo. They have no clue that she's really crying because Romeo's been thrown out of the city. So they they come in and they're like, "We've got good news. We were going to make you wait for a few years before you marry Count Paris, but since you're so sad, we know this will cheer you up. You can go ahead and get married to him right away." And Juliet, her jaw just hits the floor. She's like, "Are you kidding me?" But she still can't defy her parents to their face. So she tries when it's just her and her mom. She's like, "Mom, I want to tell you something. I don't like this guy. I don't want to marry him." And Mom's like not hearing it. "Honey, you're young, your parents know better than you. He's wealthy, he's well respected, he's got a big palace. You're not going to get a better husband than this, so the decision's already made, you just get to live with it." And Juliet's like, "Mom, I hate to say it, but I am not marrying this guy. And that is just it. I'm putting my foot down. I am not marrying this dude." And Mom is just as hard-headed as Juliet. Mom says, "You are. That's all there is to it. You don't have an option, and I don't want to hear any more of this. Go to your room. You'll be married tomorrow. Period." Well, Juliet slips out again and she goes to Friar Lawrence and she says, I can't, like, I'm already married to Romeo. I can't be married to Count Paris. What do I do? And so Friar Lawrence comes up with one of the all time worst ideas to fix a problem, right? If you want to take a problem and make it worse, go to Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence says, well, in addition to preaching, I like to mess around with chemicals. And I have this really potent, drug that if you'll take it, it will knock you out, like put you in a coma for 42 hours. And like you'll be so comatose, there's no way that they can tell that you're not dead. And so he gives her the formula, and it's got its little potion, and and so she goes home, and the parents are like, well, you're getting married to Count Paris tomorrow. Everybody smile and be happy. It's your wedding day. She goes into her room and she drinks the potion, and of course, she's out on the floor. And parents come in and they think that she's drunk poison. They don't know that it's a potion. They think she's dead, right? They think, oh man, we were trying to force her to marry Count Paris. She said she didn't want to marry him. And now she's killed herself. And so they are just like so heartbroken. So they take her and they have a funeral. And of course, Friar Lawrence knows she's not dead. They carry her to the family burial cave kind of place, and they put her in this grave. And they don't bury her, fortunately. They put her in a cave, rock in front of the door, and all this stuff. And Friar Lawrence is going to send a message to Romeo and say, everything's cool. Juliet will be able to join you in a few days. Well, he never gets the message. Instead, his servant is kind of talking. Yeah, well, I heard that this Capulet girl was going to get married to Count Paris, and she was so unhappy with that she drank poison and died. And Romeo's like, who'd you say is dead? Oh, Juliet Capulet, drank poison and died rather than marry this old man. And Romeo is like, well, you know how Romeo is. He can't handle anything, and especially the death of his wife, it wipes him out, right? So despite the fact that the Prince of Verona has said, if you ever come back, you're going to die, he has to go back to Verona. He has to go back and mourn her at her grave. And so, completely convinced that she is dead, he buys poison. You see where this is going, right? He goes back to Verona, goes to the cemetery, goes to her grave, and is there, like, all laying over on the stone, lying there, and the stone that's the door to the tomb. And while he's there, like, just as engrossed in mourning as he can be, this Count Paris shows up to mourn her himself, right? And he thinks he's the one, I was her fiance. He doesn't get the message. Like, she literally, she's in the grave now because she didn't want to marry you. And Count Paris, like, it does not say, nah, he didn't understand. She's dead. I don't know why she's dead. We would have been married tomorrow. And so when he gets there, there's Romeo at the grave, and he thinks that Romeo is a vandal, going to break in and maybe steal jewelry or whatever. And so Count Paris is like, you're going to vandalize the grave of my beloved, pulls out his sword, where Romeo pulls out his sword, and the two of them go at it, and Romeo kills Paris. Paris dies. Romeo opens the grave, goes inside, goes to this cave, and he holds the body of his wife, Juliet, in his arms. He's completely convinced, she is just graveyard dead, right? And so he weeps over her, and he says poems about her, and then he pulls the real poison out and drinks it and dies. Just falls over, right there. And Juliet, Juliet wakes up, right? As planned, she wakes up. And there's Romeo, and he's in the tomb next to her, and he's dead, and he's really, really dead. And so she holds his body, and she weeps big tears, and she says poems about him. And she takes his knife, and she stabs herself and falls dead over top of him. Well, the Friar Lawrence is left to tell the news to the families. Well, your children were in love with each other, and they were married, and they loved each other, and they're dead because you all were feuding. So Friar Lawrence brings the Capulets and the Montagues and the Prince of Verona to the tomb, and there they see the dead bodies, and Friar Lawrence really heaps that, this is all your fault, he said to the parents. Somehow he escapes all the blame. And I think he was pretty dumb in the way that he handled the whole situation. But anyhow, the parents are like, oh, we were so stupid. We should never have mistreated them. They loved each other. We should have just recognized their love. And so the play ends with the Prince of Verona kind of giving this beautiful poem about their love for one another, and that's how it ends. Dead bodies everywhere, but that's love for you, I guess. All right, hope you enjoyed the story of Romeo and Juliet.